And so we can be much more, make much better decisions when our heart and mind are acting in unison. And that, to me, is the ultimate expression of a warrior, whether you're a warrior in the context of being a Navy SEAL, or being an expert on reading, or being a teacher, or police officer, right? Is to get out of your head and start getting more into your heart. And then
I'm your host, Danny Brassell, and this is the show where we celebrate the positive contributions of individuals throughout our community. And it's my joy and pleasure, and actually my honor, to have with me today Commander Mark Devine, a former Navy SEAL. First of all, thank you for your service, Mark. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I know most Americans do. Now, it's amazing all the different ventures that you have, Mark. You were a former Navy SEAL. But you've got a couple of really wonderful websites now, and we're going to be airing them throughout the episode. SEALFIT.com, and the one that's very intriguing to me, UnbeatableMind.com. Tell us a little bit about both of those sites, if you could.
Well, the businesses around those were formed out of really my experiences as a Navy SEAL. 20 years, half of that active duty and half of it as reserve officer, which allowed me the freedom of time to kind of get into entrepreneurship. And Navy SEALs are very entrepreneurial in general, because they're very independent and very creative, and we have an attitude and a mindset of being able to accomplish things at a high level independently. So that translated well into entrepreneurship. But what fired me up and what my passion has kind of unfolded as I've developed in life is to develop other human beings using the tools and the principles that I kind of learned as a SEAL and as a warrior. And so the physical training aspect of that is SEALFIT.com, or SEALFIT in general. And we started SEALFIT in 2007 by training Navy SEAL candidates on contract for the government, and then I started doing it for anyone who really was willing to work hard and to pay the price. And the training programs tend to be really like a Ph.D. level program in physical development. Mm-hmm. Extremely compelling and extremely effective. So in that program we have a 1-week live-in academy and a 3-week live-in academy where I have up to 20 people live on site. They train from 5 in the morning until about 8 or 9 at night for 7 days straight.
Men and women?
Men and women. We haven't had a ton of women, by nature of the guys, men usually self-select this, although we're starting to see women trickle in, and they do extremely well.
Good.
And this is a comprehensive, what I call warrior development program. And then the second and most interesting program is the what I call the Kokoro camp. Right? This is when all the images are really circulated around on our website. And it's very, very intense crucible experience based upon the Navy SEALs Hell Week model, which is nonstop physical training and mental toughness training for 50 hours. And so we have people come from all over the world who go through this 50-hour crucible experience. And we have a saying that in Kokoro, you'll meet yourself for the first time. And the results and the testimonials kind of bear that out. The people literally are transformed from this intense experience that we can talk about a little bit more later on, but it's crazy. And so what Unbeatable Mind is I realized early on, well, first, during the academies, I teach mental toughness. And unlike what most people think, like mental toughness is not just doing barbell curls for your brain. There's a lot to it. And when I went to the SEALs, they didn't sit me down and say, Mark, we're going to teach you mental toughness. Either you had it or you didn't. And those who didn't have it were flushed out. I mean, in my class, I had 175 who started my training class, number 170 in 1990, and we had 19 graduates.
Wow.
Just 19. And for some reason, I had some skills that I brought to the table. And it's probably too long a story to kind of explain where they came from, but through the martial arts and through a really good competitive swimming coach and trial and error, those skills allowed me to sail through, and I ended up as honor man of my class, and I had pretty much a smile on my face every day.
And honor man's the top of your
top
class.
graduate, right? And so that was kind of, that's one of the things I came back to later on when I was developing the SEALFIT Academy. I said, what were those principles that I used and that I saw the other successful people use in SEAL training, then as a SEAL, as a top operator in the SEAL teams? And also drawing from other elite warrior traditions, like the samurai or the Spartans. What were the principles of the inner development, right? Because we all could see that by lifting more, by putting more load in your back and walking or running with it, by doing high intensity functional interval training, we knew that physical stuff, we could accomplish that because that was pretty easy. That was all external. But what about the internal stuff? And so I started to develop curriculum and practices and doing a lot of trial and error in these immersion camps where I had a lot of time to work with people. And so I developed what I called the Unbeatable Mind philosophy that I would teach side by side with the physical training. And so it had a real yin-yang approach. I mean, half the training was really hardcore physical, but you can't do that for 10 hours a day. You'd have to intersperse it with classroom and lecture and things like concentration drills and breath control drills and things that really, really develop the inner self. And what came out of that was a whole development program to create a warrior from the inside out. So, and it was very effective. Now, fast forward 5 years, and this is last year, because Unbeatable Mind is just about a year old, this coming November. I had so many people emailing me and calling me saying, hey, I really would love to come to your program, but it's just out of my lane in terms of physical readiness, right? I'm too old, or I'm a woman with kids, and I just no way that I could take the time away. And so I could really only handle a few hundred people a year in my training at SEALFIT. So I said, well, why can't I package this information and put it into an online format and maybe a book someday? So the book I'm working on, but the online training program became the Unbeatable Mind Academy. And the first version, or the first wicket, is a 12-month program called the Foundations course. And so I launched that last November, and very quickly, just with our tribe that's following SEALFIT, we have 1,200 enrolled.
Unbelievable.
And my goal is to have 2,000 by the end of the year. And the neat thing about it is that you can do this in your living room. And it's not, even though we introduce, proper physical training, the type of training we do at SEALFIT in the program, you do it at your own pace, you do it and you scale it as you need to, and eventually, you'll be training at that level if your body, will withstand it, which most people will. But regardless, you'll be able to train much better, more effectively, because your mind and your spirit will be locked in and aligned. And so I was very pleased to note that the testimonials I started getting were equally as strong as the people who came and trained with me in person. So this is really the future of where I'm going to be putting a tremendous amount of my energy and focus, is developing the ability to forge mental toughness and an unbeatable mind in people who probably will never or may never step foot on the SEALFIT campus.
What kinds of people do you think are attracted to Unbeatable Mind? What's your clientele like?
Well, I think it's really anybody who is performing well but sees that there's a gap, a delta between what their potential is and where they're at right now. And they're just seeking a comprehensive answer to how do I get from here to there. And so, typically the people who gravitate toward Unbeatable Mind aren't unwilling to work hard. I mean, they're really used to working hard, but they're maybe overwhelmed with the amount of commitments they have, the busyness of their lives. Going to the gym 3 times a week is about all they think they can manage. And so I've got top executives, I've got entrepreneurs, investors, I've got teachers, a lot of law enforcement, military, and special ops candidates. But they're probably the smallest percentage because it's a pretty small pool to begin with. So it's pretty broad. I think that really it's anybody who's looking for an edge.
Yeah, and that's what I like about. I really liked when I first met you in Santa Clara. We were at a seminar together, and everything you talk about. When you meet a Navy SEAL, I'm in awe. I'm always like, wow, you're the best of the best of the best. But one of the first things you taught me, you don't have to do all this physical stuff, Danny. All you have to do is learn how to do a lunge the right way.
Right. That's right.
And I love
squat,
that.
Right.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Because it's the whole program seems like things that, no, you don't have to do 20 million things.
You don't have to do it all, right. So if you watch the video that's on our homepage at SEALFIT, that the very last thing I say is even a Navy SEAL started with a single push-up. And that's ultimately very true, right? What we have learned is that there's a narrow range of really highly effective functional exercises in the realm of fitness development that will make a significant difference in your quality of life. For instance, or let me preface by saying our philosophy is that the body is a system and it needs to move as a system. And when you go to the gym and you sit down on a Cybex machine and you isolate your entire body to do a lat pull down or a leg extension or a bicep curl, what you're doing is untraining your body as a system, and you're training that muscle to be big in that really narrow range of motion. So we throw all that stuff out. Like, our physical training program doesn't rely on any fancy machines, no treadmills. I mean, what you need is your body and maybe some, as you get into it, some ability to move load. So what I mean, like a kettlebell or a dumbbell, and a pull-up bar, right? Jump rope would be nice. Okay, so that's it. That's your kit. It can fit in your trunk. And, the kettlebells we're talking about for beginners, men 35 pounds, ladies 20. So it's not a ton of load. Significant difference, though, when you start to add load and you do ballistic exercise. Now, the first movement that we need to learn is what we call the air squat. So proper air squat, essentially being able to take your body from a fully extended standing position down into a low squat with proper form. Now what you're doing, you're executing a hip opener and a knee opener, and then you're closing, and then you're opening them, right? So think about all the movements in life that require you to open and close your knees and your hips. So lifting things up, running, jumping, sitting down, squatting, swimming, rolling around on the mat, so fighting or grappling, or that'd be a higher expression. And so, and also, let's take this to the realm of longevity and health. When elderly people, get up there, right, and they haven't been doing any sort of functional movement,
it's always their hip.
Their hip is the one that goes. It's the major issue, right? And so if they fall and break their hip, I read a stat a while ago, and don't quote me on the stat, but something like 75% of those octogenarians or beyond who break their hips tend to lose their lives within a year because they can't move. They're not mobile. When you're not mobile, your spirit starts to wane, the blood's not flowing, your health will overall decline precipitously. So if everyone were to just do like 100 air squats a day, and even you could teach this, we have plenty of 60 and older in our local membership. Just use a chair as a foundation. The chair could be slightly above, where your butt essentially would be at the parallel level. And just, sit back into the chair and then stand up again 100 times. Extremely powerful. That's, again, for maybe the 60 and over crowd. But for guys like you and I and a lot of the listeners, just learning the basic air squat. And we have tons of videos on our website. And then look at other body weight exercises. So the foundational ones are the push-up, really effective push-up where you're touching your chest and getting a full extension in a plank position. And the sit-up, right? So sit-ups seem really easy to a lot of people, but to do them well, we like to use what we call butterfly sit-up, which takes your hip flexors out of the game. You put your soles of your feet together and just let your knees fall out. And then the last is a pull-up. Now, a lot of people think, well, I can't do a pull-up, but we have women come into our training center who've never done a pull-up in their life, and within 6 months, they're doing 6 to 10 unassisted pull-ups.
It's about 6 to 10 more than I can.
Right, and so let's get you in there.
Absolutely.
So think about the major functions of the body. First, all movements, all good movements, start at the core and end with the extremities. And so all of our functional movements start at the core and end with the extremities. So for instance, a push-up, core engagement is the most important, the first thing, and then the extremity doing the work. Same thing with the squat. Pull-up, same thing, core engagement, and then literally the core engagement will give you about 20% or more lift and energy in the pull. And then the second principle is let's move the way our body wants to move in nature. But what do we do in nature? We squat, we lift things up, we push things, we pull things, and we throw things, and then some combination thereof, right? And so those are the big four, right? Squatting, which then translates to lifting properly, like in a deadlift, just lifting something heavy up with proper form. That's a squat, but done in the opposite direction, right? Pushing something away, pulling something toward you, or pulling yourself over a window ledge if there's a crisis or a fire, and then, gosh, that's it.
Yeah,
those
I
are
mean,
the big four.
well, and that's what I like is the physical program is just an extension of your overall philosophy.
It's the
Everything,
philosophy,
everything
right.
is a core philosophy, and they all relate to one another.
Correct.
Now, I really like your, what does Kokoro mean? Because you keep on talking about Kokoro warrior.
Right.
What is
Right.
Kokoro?
Well, I love that word. There's no English equivalent. That's why I chose to use it. Now, it's a Japanese term that my definition, and the best I can, and I've read a couple different definitions, but it means merging your heart and your mind in action. We have this principle called the 5 mountains in Unbeatable Mind. The 5 mountains are essentially the 5 capacities that we have of human beings that we must develop. And now there are others like musical intelligence and stuff like that, but the 5 that we want to focus on as warriors and leaders are physical development. We've already spent a lot of time talking about that. Mental development. And what I mean by mental is not just your rational brain, but learning how to tap in to use your creative subconscious, developing the full capacity of your mind. It's been estimated that your rational mind accounts for about 12% of our thinking capacity. And the other 88% lies in that creative subconscious, our intuition. And maybe what we would call our heart mind, right? So more recent research is showing that the heart, 60% of the heart has neurological functioning, just like the brain. And so your heart is a thinking organism. So the 5 mountains, back to that, physical, mental, and then the third is emotional, which is really thinking with feeling, right? And the fourth is our awareness and intuition development. So literally being able to think with our belly and to listen to our intuition, our sixth sense, and to cultivate that, which is kind of a lost asset for a lot of humans, at least here in the
How many
West.
people have a good sixth sense?
Well, I think everyone's got it, but they just ignore it, and so it lays dormant. Maybe it atrophies.
Great.
And so there are skills in the warrior traditions to kind of bring that out, let it flourish, to open our what I call our sense doors or our sensory doors, and to be able to get information and to listen to it and pay attention to it and then trust it, right? And then the 5th mountain is Kokoro, and so I often say this is also warrior spirit. It's that merging of our heart and mind in action, to be able to act in integrity with your brain fully engaged as a very valuable tool, but not necessarily, running the show. We're in charge. Well, what's that we're that that other person that's in charge? Well, it's our spirit, right? And it's really moderated by our heart, and so we can be much more make much better decisions when our heart and mind are acting in unison. And that, to me, is the ultimate expression of a warrior, whether you're a warrior in the context of being a Navy SEAL or being an expert on reading or being a teacher or police officer, right, is to get out of your head and start getting more into your heart, and then to be able to act with that integrity.
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you more about your background. I mean, because there was a Mark Devine before the Navy SEALs.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the Mark before the Navy SEAL.
He was a little different. I grew up in upstate New York, was from a family that had a family business. It's actually one of the older businesses around. I mean, I think there's like 1,000 businesses that are over 100 years old. Well, our family business, Devine Brothers, was formed in like 1895 or something like that by my great-great-grandfather and his brother. My whole family works there. And, I kind of was expected to work there, I think.
What kind of business?
Oh, they make things.
Okay.
Equipment for industry, right?
Okay,
not
gotcha.
very sexy, but very useful. Right?
Uh-huh.
And anyways, I went to a Colgate University, which was a liberal arts school near where I grew up, about 45 minutes away, and majored in economics. It's kind of normal lifestyle. But my senior year, a lot of my friends were from downstate metro area, New York City, and they were heading back to these fancy jobs, investment banking, law. And I heard about a program where the big 8 accounting firms of the day were hiring liberal arts students without an accounting background or degree.
Wow.
Taking them down to Manhattan, you get a full-time job, and then assuming you got in, sending us to NYU to get our master's in accounting. I said, that sounds pretty cool, like a good opportunity. I wasn't really interested in accounting, but it sounded like a good opportunity. Again, thinking business. So I applied, I got in with Coopers and Lybrand, got into NYU, went to NYU, got my master's in accounting, but then rolled all my credits into the MBA program. Finished up with an MBA in finance. During the time there, I also studied for and passed the CPA exam. So here I was at 24 as an MBA and a CPA. and I was miserable. I mean, I just was a complete misfit to be in public accounting. I didn't like the people I was working with, and I know a lot of good accountants is more like I was the misfit, not them. They were perfectly aligned. More importantly, though, my clients were investment banks like Salomon Brothers and Drexel Burnham, these big banks that don't even exist. And I saw such greed and such carelessness in that environment. And there wasn't a single guy at any of the firms that I worked for, not a single guy my age or even older who would engage with me, who would even look at me like a human being. I mean, I was this low-life accountant. And it was just a strange environment in the 80s. And I don't know if it's that way anymore, but I really got turned off. Turned off about Wall Street, turned off about just this idea of being in a suit and climbing the corporate ladder. And I could go on in the story, but I won't. But what saved me really was I had gotten into a martial arts tradition, a traditional karate school. My first true mentor in life was this guy named Tadashi Nakamura, the founder of Seido Karate in Manhattan. And he started to teach me through the practice of karate, and through these meditation classes that we'd have and these retreats at the Zen Mountain Monastery, where we would take, senior students up there, and we would spend a whole weekend, and we'd meditate with the monks. We'd practice karate for 6 hours a day, and we'd help them garden and cook, and it's an incredible experience.
That's great.
But I call this period, polishing the mirror of my soul, and I started to settle things down, and I started to think a little bit more clearly and pay attention to that little voice inside of me, and that voice was saying I was misaligned. I was trying to do a job in a career that was going to make other people happy, that looked good to society. I had all these great credentials, but it wasn't who Mark Devine was supposed to be. And so, fortunately, I had the courage to look even deeper and not shy from that, and I started to think, well, what should I be doing? And I'm thinking, actually, through a deep process of contemplation, I started to identify really with a warrior path. And so I looked at, the Marine Corps and other warrior traditions, and even some adventurous things like working on an oil rig and, going to Alaska. And the SEALs became there wasn't much information about them in 1987 or 8. I had one recruiting video titled Be Someone Special. I think I watched it 50 times or so. It's an awesome video. And I just identified, that's what I want to be. I wanted to be someone special, right? I didn't want to be an accountant.
Pretty good marketing, huh?
Right? It was great.
They don't have a Be Someone Special marketing video?
No, they should. They ditched that one a while ago, but I thought that was terrific. I've often thought maybe I'll use that.
Yeah.
Then, so I decided to go for it. And I started to, work toward that, started to visualize myself succeeding as a SEAL before I even got accepted. And sure enough, I was lucky enough to be one of 2 guys that year who got into officer candidate school with a direct line to the SEAL training. And that was 1989. So, long-winded version of the, how I got from CPA into the Navy SEAL.
Well, but that's a good version. I mean, most people, they think you just become a Navy SEAL.
No,
I knew that wasn't the
lengthy
case.
process.
Well, and you were always, even in college, you were a competitive swimmer and a rower. You've been a triathlete. So you had the physical part down. What do you see? Because we're starting to run low on time. I knew this would go really quickly. When you're training people for Unbeatable Mind, what do you think is the biggest thing that hangs people up for succeeding?
Well, confidence in their abilities certainly is a big one. And so we develop confidence by really leaning into challenges. Right? One of the reasons the Kokoro camp is so powerful is that it really creates a new sense of what's possible. And we have this saying that a human being is capable of 20 times more than they think they are. You come to Kokoro camp, and that's your 20x, and then you go forth in life and everything else seems easy. So developing confidence by benchmarking success. It's one of the things we do in the Unbeatable Mind program is take a challenge, now you know you can do that. Accept a bigger challenge, now you know you can do that. You start to build confidence through this cycle of success. The second thing is a lot of people take on too many commitments. They have too much going on in their lives, so they can't focus on the right thing. And the flip side of that is that they really don't know the right thing to focus on. And so you've really got to know your why, right? Your overriding purpose, so that you can then do the old Pareto 80-20 analysis and say, you know what, my purpose is to be a warrior, and therefore these other 6 things that I'm doing in my life don't really fit anymore.
Wow.
And everyone's got to do this time and time again in their lives and shed. Just like you go into your closet and you shed all the T-shirts you haven't worn in a year. We need to do this with the commitments we take in our life, and oftentimes the people that we let into our lives. And because they all take your energy and they all take your focus. Now, once we can get that, so we're aligned with our purpose and are passionate about it, and we start to clear away some of the clutter, we're decluttering our external environment. Now we got to declutter our internal environment. And so we do this through concentration practices, just like sitting still or somatic movement like yoga. So we teach a program called Warrior Yoga that I developed, which gets people to slow down and move gracefully and concentrate on their breathing and on the movement. Another simple practice is what I call box breathing. You sit quietly and you breathe deeply into a count of 4 or 5, hold it to that same count, exhale to the count of 4 or 5, and hold it for that count. And you just let your mind focus on that cycle. And we don't have the time to get into the details, but it's extraordinary what happens, both physiologically and psychologically, when you do these practices. So that gets our inner space under control. We get to be able to concentrate deeply and to then start to do what I call the first premise is win in our minds first before we go out and tackle a major problem or challenge.
Well, and the visualization piece, I think, is just key.
That's key
just
too.
we only have about a minute left. What's your biggest tip for people besides joining Unbeatable Mind? What is your number one tip for people that really want to take that next step?
Cultivate a love for silence, to spend more time alone in silence. Okay, this is really the biggest challenge that we have in this kind of tethered, we're always on our iPhone and connected to some device world, right? So it's to take time during the day, particularly in the morning. And so I have a morning ritual that I recommend to people, and I'll go through it real quick. You wake up, first thing you do is drink a really big glass of fresh water. Second thing you do is ask yourself 2 or 3 really powerful questions. Who and what am I grateful for? Right? What's my purpose, and how am I going to move the dial today toward that purpose? Then sit down in silence and either contemplate or do that box breathing practice or do 15, 20 minutes of yoga. Then go out and crush it, because you've won in the mind before you hit the battlefield of that day.
You got me pumped to do it right now. So folks, the site is unbeatablemind.com and SEALFIT.com. It's been my pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
There are amazing people like Mark in our community. If you know somebody you'd like to see as a guest of a future episode of People Make a Difference, please go to email me at danny@dannybrassell.com. My last name spelled like Brassell.com. There's folks like Mark out in our community every day making a difference. You can make a difference too. Until next time, God bless you.